I learned 3 important things during humanity's first official first contact celebration. First, never drink anything labeled ceremonial, when the aliens refuse to explain what the ceremony is. Second, gravity-adjusting dance floors are fun right up until the floor decides you weigh 12 pounds. And third, the one currently rewriting my future, never, under any circumstances, joke about donating your DNA to a group of very serious alien women. At the time, it had felt like a perfectly reasonable joke. To be fair, the entire evening already felt like a fever dream. The diplomatic station hovered in orbit above Europa, polished to a shine that made every surface reflect starlight like we were partying inside a diamond. Someone had insisted on live music, which turned out to be a choir of floating crystalline organisms harmonizing in mathematical intervals. You didn't hear the songs so much as feel it rearranging your spine. I was there because I was logistics certified, which is bureaucratic language for no one more important was available. My job mostly involved making sure ambassadors had the correct translation implants, and that nobody accidentally declared war over a seating chart. Easy work. Quiet work. Work that absolutely did not include becoming a genetic resource. I was halfway through my 3rd glass of shimmering blue liquid, tasted like citrus and bad decisions, when they approached me. The Lyrathai females were difficult to ignore. Nearly 7 feet tall, posture so perfect it made Marines look slouchy, skin carrying a faint pearlescent sheen like moonlight on water. Their eyes were large, bright, and unsettlingly focused. Not predatory. Evaluative. One of them tilted her head slightly. Our research indicates you are a baseline example of a human male. I blinked. Baseline is generous. My high school gym teacher described me as statistically present. They didn't laugh. I would later learn the Lyrathai consider unnecessary laughter a neurological malfunction. Another step closer, studying my face with open curiosity. Is it true, she asked, that humans form pair bonds through prolonged recreational proximity? Recreational proximity, I repeated. You mean, hanging out? Affirmative. Well, I said, swirling the glowing drink. Sometimes we call it dating. Sometimes we call it I guess we live together now because either of us canceled the streaming subscription. Very technical process. They exchanged glances, their expressions subtle but clearly communicative. You display humor under observation, the first one noted. Mostly under panic, I said. Then came the question that detonated my life. For the purposes of interspecies resilience, she continued calmly, would you be willing to contribute human DNA to a cooperative reproductive initiative? Now, any properly trained diplomat would have paused, asked clarifying questions, possibly called a supervisor. I, however, had ceremonial alien champagne in my bloodstream. So I grinned and lifted my glass. Sure, ladies, I said. You can have my DNA. Silence fell with surgical precision. 3 slender wrists lifted in perfect synchronization. Bands of light shimmered into existence above their forearms, projecting translucent panels filled with flowing symbols. I frowned. What are you doing? Recording consent, one replied. My smile faltered. I'm sorry, what? A soft chime sounded. Something warm pressed briefly against my palm. The glass I was holding had apparently doubled as a biometric scanner. Another chime followed. Contract generated, she said. Wait, hold on, contract? She turned the projection toward me. Lines of translated text cascaded downward faster than I could process. You have entered a legally binding declaration of reproductive cooperation under Lyrathai courtship law, she explained. I made a joke. The 3 of them froze. Actually froze. Then the tallest spoke, her tone gentle but firm. Humor is recognized in our culture as a form of subconscious truth expression. One does not jest about genetic offering without underlying intent. Oh, we absolutely do, I said. We joke about everything. Death, taxes, karaoke. Rescinding sincere humor constitutes deception, she continued. A cold prickle crept down my spine. And deception, she added, is a diplomatic insult. I looked around for help. Unfortunately, my supervisor chose that exact moment to appear at my shoulder. He scanned the projection, then inhaled sharply in the quiet, horrified way of a man calculating how many committees would be formed about this. "What did you do?" he whispered. I joked. He rubbed his face. "Congratulations," he muttered. "You are now humanity's first romantic ambassador." "I don't want to be a romantic ambassador." The tallest Lyrithite tapped the display. "Please review the natural method clause." "I'm afraid to ask." "Our civilization discontinued artificial reproductive practices centuries ago. Emotional compatibility is required to ensure resilient offspring." Offspring. That word echoed louder than the choir. "So when you say contribute DNA, you don't mean a lab sample?" "Correct." I made a small sound that might have been my soul leaving my body. She expanded the contract, highlighting several items. Step 1. Completion of a 47-point compatibility questionnaire. 40. Why are there so many points? Precision prevents relational instability. She continued. Step 2. Formal introduction to the extended hive family. How extended? Approximately 600 immediate relations. The room tilted slightly. Step 3. A cuddle endurance assessment. I'm sorry, a what? A non-reproductive physical proximity trial used to evaluate emotional regulation. That is the most clinical way anyone has ever described cuddling. Step 4. Mandatory partnership education seminars. My supervisor made a strangled noise behind me that sounded suspiciously like suppressed laughter. I stared at the contract again, hoping the letters would rearrange into something less terrifying. They did not. You can't be serious, I said weakly. We are, she replied. Your profile indicates promising mate qualities. What qualities? Adaptive humor. Cooperative posture. Symmetrical shoulders. I glanced down at my shoulders, suddenly aware they were being internationally appreciated. This is insane. This is courtship, she corrected softly. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Because for the first time since this started, I noticed something beneath the formal precision in her expression. Not calculation. Nervousness. You may withdraw, she said, voice quieter now. But doing so will signal rejection of Lyrithite relational values. Translation: diplomatic mess. Earth had waited decades for peaceful contact. Trade agreements, shared research, defensive alliances, all balanced on a knife edge of cultural respect. And apparently my big mouth. My supervisor leaned in again. For the love of Earth, he whispered, do not start an interstellar incident because you couldn't hold your liquor. I looked back at the towering alien women studying me with patient intensity. What happens now? I asked. Now, she said, we begin the bonding process. Another chime sounded. Transportation is prepared, she added. Transportation to where? Her eyes brightened faintly. To meet the family. I swallowed. Apparently, I wasn't going home. I was going to be evaluated by 600 extraterrestrial in-laws, all because I thought I was being funny. The contract was 912 pages long. I know this because they gave me a tablet, a stylus, and a beverage labeled calming infusion, then politely waited while I scrolled. And scrolled. And scrolled some more. Is there a short version? I asked eventually. The Lyrithite female seated across from me tilted her head. This is the short version. I stared at her, hoping for even the faintest sign of humor. There was none. We were seated in what they call the relational preparation chamber, which looked suspiciously like a luxury lounge designed by someone who had only read about furniture in books. The chairs were slightly too curved, the lighting subtly shifted to match emotional states, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Not recycled station air. Actual rain. How are you making it smell like weather? I asked. Aromacology promotes openness, she replied. Humans just light candles. She typed something into her wrist display. Noted. Candles, primitive but symbolically effective. Please don't put that in the official report. No promises. I sighed and returned to the contract. Clause 14b, minimum cuddle duration, 90 consecutive minutes unless medically exempt. Clause 22f, mandatory snack sharing to establish cooperative instincts. Clause 31c, emotional transparency requirements during disagreements. There was, unbelievably, a conflict resolution flowchart. It had arrows. And color coding. You've diagrammed arguments, I said. Unstructured conflict leads to relational erosion. We usually just apologize and order food. Another note went into the report. I set the tablet down before my brain could leak out through my ears. Let me clarify something, I said carefully. You're treating this like a merger. An apt comparison, she said. Except both parties are encouraged to enjoy the process. I studied her properly then. She was tall, even-seated, her posture naturally elegant. Up close, the pearlescent sheen of her skin carried subtle patterns, almost like light drifting beneath the surface. Her eyes were steady but not cold. Observant. Present. What is your name? I asked. Sale, she replied. Sale, I repeated. Are you always this calm while ruining someone's life? Her expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something adjacent. I am not attempting to ruin your life. I am attempting to determine whether our lives might be improved through partnership. That was unexpectedly reasonable. Dangerously reasonable. She slid the tablet back toward me. We should begin the compatibility questionnaire. Oh, good, I muttered. My favorite. A soft tone sounded, and the first question appeared. How often do you require reassurance from a bonded partner? I snorted. Define require. Interpret freely. Put down more than I admit publicly. She entered it without hesitation. Next question. Define personal space in meters. Depends, I said. Are we talking strangers, friends, or someone who steals my fries? She paused. Steals. Never mind. Put 2 meters for strangers. 0 for trusted individuals. She looked pleased at that. Next. Preferred sleep proximity orientation? I squinted. You've got diagrams. Visual clarity reduces embarrassment. Well, I'm already embarrassed, so let's go with, side by side? She nodded approvingly. Classic configuration. Stable. We continued like that for a while, the absurdity stacking higher with each question. When distressed, do you prefer solutions or empathy? Both, I said. Preferably empathy first so I don't feel like a malfunctioning appliance. Her gaze softened slightly. Efficient answer. Somewhere around question 23, the humor started fading into something else. Curiosity, maybe? Because none of these questions felt clinical. They felt intentional. Like someone was trying very hard to understand what made closeness work. Then she asked quietly, do humans fear emotional dependence? The room seemed to still. I leaned back, considering. Some do, I admitted. We pretend we don't need people. Makes us feel safer. And you? I exhaled. I think not needing anyone sounds lonelier than being hurt. She watched me for a long moment, her expression unreadable but attentive in a way that made me oddly aware of my heartbeat. That perspective is compatible with Lirathai bonding philosophy, she said softly. Well, I said, forcing a lighter tone. Add it to my list of accidental qualifications. We reached question 47 faster than I expected. What is your primary motivation for entering partnership? I hesitated. Survival? I tried. She waited. I groaned. Fine. Connection. Feeling like someone sees you and stays anyway. She entered the answer, then met my eyes. A strong response. Before I could deflect with another joke, she shifted the display. Preliminary analysis indicates high compatibility. I blinked. Excuse me? Humans demonstrate unusual emotional elasticity, she explained. Your species forms attachments quickly yet maintains individual identity. This is considered an advanced relational trait. Or we're just messy. Messiness allows growth. I stared at her. No one had ever described humanity like that to me. Usually we were the reckless newcomers, loud, impulsive, dangerously creative. Not emotionally advanced. A soft chime interrupted us. Sale glanced at her wrist. It is time to discuss the High family introduction. Ah, yes. The 600 relatives. My stomach attempted to fold itself into origami. Tell me they're not all going to be there at once. They will. Do they at least come with name tags? They come with curiosity. That's worse. She studied me carefully. Are you afraid? Sale, I get nervous when 3 coworkers sing happy birthday to me. That is statistically understandable. I dragged a hand down my face. What happens if they don't like me? They will evaluate whether you are kind, stable, and capable of reciprocal care. Couldn't they just ask for references? You are being humorous again, she observed. Defense mechanism. She leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering. For what it is worth. I believe they will approve. Why? Because you have not attempted to escape. I considered it. But you remained. There was no accusation in her tone. Just observation. I shrugged weakly. Didn't want to start a war before breakfast. Something warm flickered in her expression. Your humor often disguises sincerity. And your species is terrifyingly perceptive. She hesitated, then said more quietly. I was uncertain you would continue after learning the scope of our traditions. I blinked at her. You were worried I'd back out? Yes. The honesty caught me off guard. For the first time since this began, she didn't look like an unshakable diplomatic force. She looked hopeful. Which was somehow much more dangerous. Well, I said slowly, you never treated me like a specimen. Hard to run from someone who's actually trying to know you. The faint, almost smile returned. I am relieved. Another chime sounded, deeper this time. Transport is ready, she said. I stood, immediately regretting it as my knees remembered the 600 in-laws waiting somewhere out there in the galaxy. We started toward the exit corridor, its curved walls glowing softly. Just before we stepped through, I stopped. Sale? Yes? If your entire family hugs me at once, I'm filing a formal complaint. That would require Form 88C. You're joking. I am not. I stared at her. Then, to my absolute shock, a tiny hint of amusement touched her eyes. As the shuttle doors opened and starlight flooded the corridor, one realization settled heavily into my chest. I had accidentally agreed to be judged by 600 extraterrestrial relatives. And somehow, that wasn't the part scaring me anymore. If you ever want to feel aggressively human, I highly recommend landing on an alien world that looks like it was grown instead of built. The Lyrathi homeworld spread beneath us in sweeping curves and luminous patterns, its cities rising like living sculptures rather than stacked architecture. Nothing had sharp corners. Towers spiraled upward as though coaxed by gravity instead of resisting it, their surfaces shimmering with faint internal light that pulsed slowly, like breathing. Are the buildings alive? I asked as the shuttle descended. In a limited sense, Sale replied. They respond to environmental needs and emotional density. Emotional density, I repeated. Earth landlords can't even respond to plumbing. She made a soft note on her wrist display. Humans display humor during atmospheric entry. Humans display humor when terrified. The shuttle settled onto a platform that unfurled to meet us, petal-like structures extending outward until they formed a walkway. Warm air drifted inside, carrying a scent that reminded me of rain hitting sun-warmed stone. I stepped out, immediately aware that the ground had a faint give to it, not soft, exactly, but forgiving. This entire planet feels like it has better posture than I do, I muttered. They are aware you are arriving, Sale said. Who is they in this sentence? My family. Right. The 600. I didn't even get 10 steps before the first group approached. They moved with calm purpose, taller Lirathi, shorter ones, some with silver threading through their luminous skin patterns. One elderly female stepped forward, her gaze so sharp I briefly considered confessing to crimes I hadn't committed. "This is the human," she declared. "Hello?" I said weakly. Without warning, she took my hands, turning them over with surprising strength. "Warm," she observed. Another circled behind me. Posture slightly defensive but correctable. A third leaned in close and inhaled. Stress hormones elevated. Understandable. I looked at Sale. "A little help?" "This is the welcoming assessment," she said calmly. "Welcoming feels like the wrong word." The elder squeezed my fingers once, then nodded. "Fragile. We will be gentle." "Fragile. Fantastic." More arrived in a steady stream. "This is my cousin Aaron," Sale said as a broad-shouldered Lirathi gave my arm a testing shake that rattled my teeth. "Grip strength inadequate," Aaron announced. "I type for a living," I croaked. "Trainable," he decided. A smaller Lirathi darted forward and pressed a small device against my neck. "What was that?" "Metabolic scan," she said brightly. "You process sugars efficiently. Good for shared desserts." 5 grandmothers materialized next. I knew they were grandmothers instantly because they radiated the same unstoppable authority as every grandmother who had ever lived. One adjusted my collar. Presentation matters. Another tapped my chest lightly. Heart rhythm accelerated. "That's because I'm being evaluated by a small army. Transparency is healthy," she replied. They conferred quietly among themselves before one announced, "He jokes when overwhelmed. This suggests psychological flexibility." "I feel so seen," I whispered. Sale leaned closer. "They approve of humor. I'm using it to survive. That is often its purpose." Eventually we were guided into a vast communal chamber where soft light pooled overhead like dawn frozen in place. The floor arranged itself into gentle tiers, and as more Lirathi entered I realized with a creeping sense of vertigo that this might actually be all of them. Or at least enough of them to qualify as a census. "This is the compatibility assembly," Sale explained. "You hold assemblies for dating? For significant bonds." A hush fell. An elder stepped forward. "Human," she began, "you have been observed for kindness towards service staff, patience during questioning, and willingness to remain despite uncertainty. These traits are favorable." I blinked. "You were watching me before we even got here?" "Observation reduces risk." "Fair." She continued, "Do you intend respect towards Sale if partnership proceeds?" I glanced at Sale. She met my gaze steadily, but there was something new there, vulnerability, carefully contained. "Yes," I said simply. The elder inclined her head. "Good." A ripple of quiet approval moved through the chamber. "That's it," I whispered. "No trial by combat?" "Combat is reserved for hostile courtships," Sale said. "Those exist?" "Rarely." Before I could ask anything else, a soft chime sounded. Sale turned to me. "It is time for the cuddle endurance assessment." Of course it was. I was led to a curved seating structure layered with impossibly soft fabric. The material adjusted as we sat, supporting every inch of my spine until I felt suspiciously relaxed. "Rules?" I asked. "Maintain comfortable contact," Sale said. "Engage in natural conversation. Notify me if circulation is impaired. Circulation is always something I'd like to keep." She shifted slightly closer, one arm settling around me with careful deliberation, as if I might shatter. I tensed automatically. "Breathe," she said gently. "Right. Breathing. Good skill." After a minute, the initial awkwardness began to ebb. She was warm, warmer than I expected, and the steady rhythm of her breathing created an odd sense of calm. "This is not terrible," I admitted. "It is not intended to be. You treat affection like a sport. It is a discipline. We sat like that while the chamber gradually resumed its low hum of activity, family members respectfully pretending not to stare. So, I said after a while, what happens if I sneeze? Do I fail? You would be offered a tissue. Harsh but fair. Silence settled again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just quiet. After some time, she spoke. I was concerned you would withdraw upon arrival. I thought about it, I said honestly. Why did you not? I considered that. Because running would be easier. Because none of this was my plan. Because staying meant being seen in ways I hadn't expected. Finally, I said, you never made me feel like an experiment. Her hold tightened just slightly. You are not. We completed the full 90 minutes without numb limbs or emotional collapse, which apparently counted as a strong performance. I am impressed, she said as we stood. I once sat through a 14-hour flight next to a man eating boiled eggs. This is nothing. That sounds traumatic. It built character. Next came the relationship seminar. Yes. Seminar. We entered a circular room where gentle projections illustrated concepts as a facilitator spoke. Healthy bonds require constructive disagreement, the instructor said. A diagram appeared showing two figures arguing, then reconnecting. We recommend stating needs without accusation. I leaned towards Sale. Humans could absolutely use this. You do not teach it? We mostly figure it out mid-argument. She looked alarmed enough that I added, sometimes we even apologize afterward. By the time we emerged, my brain felt pleasantly overloaded. Somewhere between the metabolic scans, the grandmothers, and the structured cuddling, something had shifted. This no longer felt like a trap. It felt intentional. As twilight spread across the living city, Sale and I paused along a balcony grown seamlessly from the structure beneath us. Lights awakened across the landscape like constellations answering the sky. My family holds you in high regard, she said quietly. I'm relieved. Being labeled fragile had me worried. It was said with protectiveness. I glanced at her. You know, somewhere between the questionnaires and the grandmothers, this stopped feeling like a contract. She watched me, that steady attentiveness returning, and started feeling like courtship. I finished. For the first time since I'd met her, Sale didn't immediately respond. But the warmth in her expression said enough that words weren't necessary. The loophole was buried on page 704. I found it at 2 a.m. while sitting in a guest chamber that subtly adjusted its temperature every time I shifted under the blanket. Apparently the structure had detected restlessness and was attempting to optimize my comfort. It was failing, because nothing about discovering you might accidentally be agreeing to a lifelong alien partnership encourages sleep. I scrolled back and reread the clause for the 5th time. Mutual enthusiasm provision. If either participant determines that genuine desire for bonded partnership is absent, the agreement must dissolve without dishonor. Without dishonor. 2 of the most beautiful words in any language. I sat up straighter. An exit. A polite, diplomatic, no hard feelings exit. My heart lifted with relief so sudden I actually laughed. Then, just as quickly, something inside my chest tightened. Because the idea of leaving didn't feel as good as it should have. I stared at the ceiling, which dimmed slightly, perhaps interpreting my silence as contemplation, and tried to be logical. This wasn't my world. This wasn't my plan. 3 days ago, my biggest worry had been whether the station cafeteria was ever going to fix the ice cream machine. Now I was on an alien homeworld, legally involved in what could only be described as structured courtship. Walking away made sense. So why did the thought of telling Sale make my stomach sink? A soft chime interrupted my spiral. Enter, I called. The doorway parted, and there she was. Sale stepped inside, her presence somehow calming the room just by occupying it. I was informed your stress indicators increased, she said. Your buildings gossip. They care. I held up the tablet. I found a clause. I assumed you would, she replied calmly. Humans are persistent problem solvers. That's a generous way to describe panic reading legal documents. She folded her hands lightly. You wish to invoke it. It wasn't a question. And that was when I noticed it, the almost imperceptible stillness in her posture. Like she had prepared herself for this possibility long ago. I didn't say that, I replied. But you considered it. Yes. She nodded once. You would depart without stigma. My family would ensure your transport and speak favorably of you. There was no bitterness in her tone. No pressure. Just respect. Oddly, that made it harder. You're making this very easy, I said. It should be easy to choose what brings you peace. I let out a slow breath. Here's the problem, I admitted. Leaving probably would have brought me peace, a few days ago. She waited. Never rushing. Never filling silence just to escape it. When this started, I thought I was signing up for an interstellar misunderstanding. I continued. Paperwork, awkward dinners, maybe a ceremonial hug. A ceremonial hug? She repeated. I don't know how your culture works. For all I knew, you had hugging uniforms. We do not. Missed opportunity. A faint glimmer of amusement touched her eyes, but it faded quickly into something more vulnerable. You stayed, she said softly. Even when you were afraid. I was terrified, I corrected. Yet you remained. I looked down at the tablet again. I kept telling myself it was for diplomacy. For Earth. For not accidentally starting a war because I opened my mouth at a party. That is a reasonable motivation. Yeah, I said. Except somewhere between your grandmother's adjusting my collar and that 90-minute cuddle marathon, it stopped being about diplomacy. Her breath caught, so quietly I might have imagined it. Explain, she said. I met her gaze. You listened to me. Not as a curiosity. Not as a specimen. As a person. She didn't move. And you chose me, I added. Not just a human. Me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? In Lyrathite bonding, the individual is always chosen. Humans say that too, I said. We're just not always brave enough to mean it. The room felt warmer now, though I doubted it was the architecture. Sale stepped closer. I did choose you, she said quietly. Your humor unsettles me, but it also brings lightness. Your emotional candor is unpredictable, and that frightens me. I blinked. You're scared? Yes. She held my gaze with unwavering honesty. Humans feel intensely. You attach quickly. You risk heartbreak despite understanding the cost. It is formidable. I huffed a small laugh. No one has ever called my dating history formidable. It is not a criticism. Silence stretched between us, not empty, but full of everything neither of us quite knew how to name yet. Finally, she spoke again. If you invoke the clause, I will accept it. Your autonomy is essential to any bond worth forming. There it was again. Respect. No coercion. No guilt. Just an open door. And suddenly, the idea of walking through it felt unbearable. I made a joke, I said slowly. Her expression softened. But staying? I continued. That part isn't a joke. For the first time since I'd met her, Sale looked genuinely surprised. You are certain? No, I admitted. I'm human. We're rarely certain about anything. A breath of laughter escaped her. But I know this, I said. Whatever this is, contract, courtship, cosmic accident, I don't want it to end because I got scared. She searched my face as if committing it to memory. You would proceed, with enthusiasm? Mutual enthusiasm, I corrected, lifting the tablet. Seems legally important. Something radiant unfolded in her expression then, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just deeply warm. Then we should amend the agreement. Within minutes, her family convened again. I tried not to panic as hundreds of luminous eyes turned toward us. The elder who had first evaluated me stepped forward. Have you reached clarity, human? I nodded. I choose to remain. A ripple passed through the assembly, softer this time, unmistakably pleased. The elder inclined her head. Then the contract shall reflect mutual desire. Sale updated the document with elegant efficiency. She turned the screen toward me. Mutually enthusiastic courtship agreement. 913 pages now. You added one? I said. A dedication page, she replied. I didn't even ask. I just pressed my thumb to the signature field. A warm chime resonated through the chamber. One of the grandmothers beamed. He signs without trembling now. Progress. Don't exaggerate, I muttered. There's still some trembling. Theron clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to rearrange my skeleton. Welcome, fragile one. Please stop calling me that. It is affectionate. As the gathering dissolved into quiet celebration, Sale stepped beside me. You understand, she said. That advanced cuddle training begins next week. There's training? And a certification assessment. I groaned. Turns out humanity's greatest export isn't technology, I said. It's the dangerous habit of caring too much. She slipped her hand into mine, gentle, deliberate, certain. Then we are fortunate, she said, to have imported you. I looked out across the living city, lights shimmering like grounded stars, and realized something that would have terrified the version of me from a week ago. I wasn't trapped here. I had chosen to stay. Honestly, the paperwork was still horrifying. But the female holding my hand? Worth every single page.